This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
It's the Noon Report from Family Life, bringing a Christian worldview to what's happening in New York, Pennsylvania, across the country, and around the world. Weather with Kevin Williams, plus special features and reports with the Family Life News team. Now, here's what's happening.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the broadcast. It's Election Day today in Florida and Wisconsin. We'll begin in Florida, where voters are deciding two congressional races in special elections in largely Republican districts. With the GOP holding just a 3-seat majority right now in Congress, these votes today hold extra significance. NBC's Ryan Nobles begins our coverage.
Now, both sides are already setting expectations for tonight. Republicans arguing that a special election always leads to lower turnout and should not be seen as a referendum on the Trump administration, while Democrats are arguing that a closer than expected race should be read as a warning to Trump and his team to change course.
Also today in Wisconsin, voters are heading to the polls to decide a judicial race that could tilt the ideological makeup of that state's highest court. It is the most expensive judicial race in U.S. history. President Trump rolls out tough new tariffs tomorrow.
What they do to us, we do to them.
President Trump expected to unveil a package of, quote, reciprocal tariffs on allies and adversaries alike worldwide, but keeping the specifics under wraps.
Correspondent Garrett Haake, we get more from CBS's Nancy Cordes.
President Trump is so confident these tariffs will work that he has dubbed Wednesday Liberation Day, and he's planning a big Rose Garden celebration.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says there's nothing to celebrate, however.
Donald Trump's trade war is playing Russian roulette with the American economy.
But White House advisor Stephen Miller is betting the tariffs will eventually pay off for the American economy.
President Trump is resetting the entire global market.
Critics contend these tariffs, however, could cause a spike in consumer prices and may inflame inflation. News from overseas today. A 63-year-old woman was pulled alive from the rubble after being trapped in earthquake debris for over 90 hours. That miracle rescue was made in the capital city of Myanmar. The death toll from last Friday's quake is now approaching 3,000. President Trump takes the first foreign trip of his second term next month when he goes to Saudi Arabia. Retired Navy Admiral Mark Montgomery.
Saudi Arabia is where he kind of kicked off his first administration in terms of international travel. So this makes sense, and it's consistent with how he sees the U.S. role and the importance of energy in our national security.
Montgomery tells Fox News the president will also use this trip to try and wind down the war in Ukraine.
What the president has to do now is what he threatened, and maximum pressure campaign against Putin. Putin only recognizes strength.
The president also plans to visit Qatar and the UAE while overseas. The UAE, the United Arab Emirates. He'll make that trip in May. A House panel is holding a hearing today on judicial overreach. Republicans on Capitol Hill argue that activist judges are trying to undermine the Trump agenda and circumvent the will of the voters.
We believe that these nationwide injunctions have really gone out of control, and this lawfare must be stopped.
Texas Congressman Lance Gooden sits on the House Judiciary Committee. Since 1963, there have only been 127 federal injunctions issued by judges against sitting presidents. 67% of all those injunctions were issued against President Trump. More than 150 pro-life groups from all 50 states have sent a joint letter to Congress urging it to defund Planned Parenthood. The aim here is to get taxpayers out of the abortion industry. Last year, Planned Parenthood received $700 million in taxpayer assistance. 40% of all the abortions performed in this country are performed at Planned Parenthood. Still to come on the Noon Report, a Tuesday edition. Judge rules on mail-in ballots. Cuomo wins COVID lawsuit. And you're not going to believe what this politician said about boys playing girls' sports.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Williams. The winter chill is back, but it won't be here too long. We'll have forecasted highs up in 10.
Okay, Kevin, we'll see you then. News where you live next. All across New York York and Pennsylvania, and this just in. A federal judge says mail-in ballots that are incorrectly dated can still count in Pennsylvania. Republicans argue this decision undermines election integrity. The judge disagreed. The RNC is planning an appeal. Another federal judge has tossed out a lawsuit against former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. It had to do with thousands of people who died from COVID in nursing homes at the start of the pandemic. The judge called the claims brought by 8 families legally deficient. Cuomo ordered nursing homes admit COVID patients back in March of 2020. He did not rescind that order until May of 2020. That decision caused the deaths ultimately of at least 15,000 people. The former governor claims he was just following federal recommendations. For the 6th year in a row, New York has failed to pass an on-time budget. They're going to miss that deadline again this year. State Assemblyman Pat Klaczynski tells WBEN in Buffalo,
we should have probably planned better, met longer, and worked this out to get this budget some closure.
Democrat Patrick Burke says the holdup has more to do with social policy than fiscal matters.
It's particularly frustrating when policy, not budgetary matters, is what prevents us from getting to an on-time budget.
Democrats are very much at odds in Albany over a proposed cell phone ban in school, involuntary hospitalization of the mentally ill, discovery laws in legal proceedings, and a proposed mask ban at protest rallies. Governor Josh Shapiro continues his push for pot in PA. He wants to commercialize marijuana sales. The governor's proposed a 20% tax on pot products to fund spending projects. A study by the Centennial Institute shows it costs society $5 for every $1 that's generated in marijuana sales. The Pittsburgh Post-Gazette issued an editorial this week arguing that pot is not the answer to Pennsylvania's long-term budget woes. Recreational marijuana is legal in 24 states, including New York. New York's Attorney General's trying to get a Justice Department lawsuit thrown out. It has to do with a controversial law in the Empire State that lets illegal immigrants get a license to drive. Family Life's Mark Webster has more.
Passed in 2019, the so-called Green Light Law has allowed thousands of illegal and non-resident immigrants to obtain driver's licenses and also blocks federal immigration and border enforcement from accessing the state DMV database. The state argues it's a valid exercise of state police powers and that ignoring immigration status and shielding who got green-lighted doesn't violate any federal statutes, while the DOJ says the law prevents access to critical information needed to enforce existing laws. They're seeking a permanent red light for New York's Green Light Law. Mark Webster, Family Life News.
Thank you, Mark. President Trump's border czar Tom Homan plans to meet with cops in Rochester, New York, who are scolded by the mayor of that sanctuary city for assisting ICE agents. Those police officers arrested 8 illegal immigrants last week, but instead of being praised, they were reprimanded by Mayor Malik Evans. Homan says he is traveling to Rochester to show his appreciation to those law enforcement officers. A doctoral student at Cornell University has self-deported after being threatened with arrest by ICE officials. The 31-year-old has twice been suspended from that Ivy League school in Ithaca, New York, for organizing disruptive protests. The Palestinian sympathizer was a vocal opponent to the Gaza war. Critics say he was also an anti-Semite. Pennsylvania Democratic State Senator Lindsey Williams is raising more than a few eyebrows by what she said recently concerning trans athletes competing against girls in girls' sports. Take a listen to this.
Female bodies are just as strong, as fast and capable as male bodies.
Those were her prepared remarks during a recent Senate Education Committee hearing on the Save Women's Sports Act, which would ban biological boys from competing against girls.
For what reason, other than political gain, are we spending time and taxpayer dollars on a completely made-up issue.
But supporters say there's nothing made up about this issue, and that's why 80% of Americans favor trans bans in female sports. The Save Women's Sports Act, by the way, passed out of the Senate Education Committee by a 7-4 vote. All the Republicans on that committee voted yes. All the Democrats voted no. There's a push in Pennsylvania to abolish the death penalty, and it's a conservative Republican who is behind this effort.
I'm very pro-life, and I believe in the sanctity of life from conception to natural death.
GOP Representative Russ Diamond says he understands the controversy swirling about this thorny issue of capital punishment.
There's a whole subset of society out there who wants to drag convicted first-degree murderers out of the courthouse and just hang them in the town square. I get that. I get that guttural reaction.
It's been over 25 years, though, since the death penalty's been used in Pennsylvania. Dauphin County DA Fran Chardo says it serves a purpose. Capital punishment.
I don't particularly like it as taking someone's life. Human life is sacred, but if someone is a risk to other people, that's sort of valuing human life.
Currently, there are 94 inmates on death row in Pennsylvania. Governor Shapiro has put a moratorium on capital punishment, meaning those condemned to die will not anytime soon. A Central New York student critically injured while crossing the street in front of her middle school yesterday afternoon. The Central Square School District in Oswego County says the 12-year-old girl was crossing Route 11 when she was hit by a car. Several classmates witnessed the incident. The driver of that car stayed at the scene and will likely, according to police, not face any charges. A Pennsylvania company has developed technology to help save a life in an emergency situation. Here's Family Life's Brian Query.
Tactical Threat Solutions, based in Cambria County, has introduced a new software called the EOP Assistant, designed to revolutionize emergency response plans for schools and businesses by making them digitally accessible. The software aims to provide quicker direction and potentially save lives during emergencies. Bob Haddad, co-owner of Tactical Threat Solutions, said their software is one of a kind. He told WJAC,
"Right now there is nothing out there that has this kind of reactivity and the ability to pull it up in such a short amount of time."
The Greater Johnstown School District has been testing the software for about a year. Brian Query, Family Life News.
All right, Brian, thank you for that. The ice boom in Lake Erie is staying put for a couple more weeks at least. Typically, that boom is removed by the 1st of April, but not this year. The U.S. Coast Guard says there's still 500 nautical miles of ice on Lake Erie. Sports is next. It's the 2-minute drill on the Family Life Noon Report.
Good afternoon, I'm Randy Snavely. Bob, the boys of summer are in full swing of things, and the Mets were swinging big time. Pete Alonso hit a granny. Starling Marte, Brandon Nimmo, Luis Torrens also hit home runs for the Amazons as they thumped the Marlins in Miami 10-4. In Philly, the Phils got a 2-run shot from Kyle Schwarber in a 4-run 7th inning. They went on to beat the Rockies 6-1. The Pirates fell to Tampa Bay 6-1. Elsewhere on the diamond, the Cubs pounded the A's 18-3. Carson Kelly hit for the cycle and drove in 5. The Cubs hammered out 21 hits, and the 18 runs allowed by the A's were the most allowed by any team in their home opener in 100 years. The Royals beat up Milwaukee 11-1. The White Sox shut out Minnesota 9-zip. Baltimore came out on top of Boston 8-5. The Reds got a pair of home runs and 7 ribbies from L.A. De La Cruz, and they beat up the Rangers 14-3. Toronto over Washington 5-2. In 10, the Angels edged the Cards 5-4. San Fran a 7-2 winner over Houston, and so was San Diego over Cleveland. The Tigers got the better of the Mariners 9-6, and the Dodgers moved to 6-0 on the season with a 6-1 win over the Braves. Speaking of Atlanta, Jurickson Profar has been suspended 80 games for using performance-enhancing drugs. Winners on the hardwood: the Thunder, Heat, Celtics, Nets, Pacers, Hornets, Lakers, and Clippers. And on the ice, the Flyers edged Nashville by a 2-1 score. Also skating to wins, the Flames, Devils, and Stars. That is a look at sports.
All right, excellent work. Thank you, Randy. And still to come on the Noon Report, Trump tariffs take effect tomorrow. The most expensive judicial race in U.S. history. And meet a hometown hero who's heading up a youth ministry in Chautauqua County.
Welcome to Breakpoint, a daily look at an ever-changing culture through the lens of unchanging truth. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. Well, every so often there's a book or worldview published that denounces the idea of worldview for Christians. The claims, which vary from writer to writer, are usually a mix of legitimate critique and also odd straw manning. Some argue that the German rationalist history of the word worldview makes it wrong, misguided, even unbiblical for Christians. Others suggest that worldview reduces authentic faith to something too cerebral, too impersonal, too formulaic. Perhaps the most common critique of worldview is that it just doesn't work anymore in today's cultural environment. And that last critique extends to most Christian intellectual work, especially apologetics. For decades now, last rites have been offered for Christian intellectual pursuits, but to paraphrase Mark Twain's comment about his own demise, rumors of the death of worldview and apologetics have been greatly exaggerated. After all, in just the last few months, millions witnessed Wesley Huff use apologetics to share the gospel with millions on Joe Rogan's podcast, as well as Wikipedia co-founder Larry Sanger proclaim a new faith in Christ and attribute it to a long intellectual journey, one which involved a popular apologetics and evangelism website. In fact, the long history of Christian intellectual work includes philosophy, science, medicine, art, virtually every area of human understanding. People still have questions. The Bible provides answers. That means that the life of the mind will always be a non-reducible aspect of the Christian faith. Most often, criticisms of Christian worldview as a concept come from those who doubt objective truth altogether, or objective morality, or Christianity's clear doctrinal stance, and yet who still wish to identify as Christian. In the past, these critiques tended to come from those who embrace more culturally and theologically liberal views. But just recently, however, a critic from the dissident right complained that Christian worldview ideas, like the image of God and knowable truth, undermine their views about race and nationalism. And he's right. They absolutely do. There are clear implications of the Bible's truth claims about God, the universe, human dignity, and many other things. And there are those criticisms who come from Christians who found that a formulaic understanding of Christian worldview didn't work the way that they had been told or had been led to think. In their experience, the Christian worldview was presented as obvious, the others as nonsense, and if they just had the right answers, they could defeat the non-Christian worldviews. And perhaps they were taught objectively that certain sins were in fact sins, but knowing that, understanding that, still didn't keep them from struggling. And perhaps they had run-ins with obnoxious Christians who like to use worldview like a club to badger people into submission, especially on narrow political opinions. Worldview certainly has been done badly, but as a movement, it's been largely self-corrective. In fact, some of the earliest champions of Christian worldview, such as Bavinck and Deweyvear, pushed worldview thinking away from the confusions of German rationalism. Almost every popular champion of Christian worldview since, from Jim Sire to Nancy Pearcey to Francis Schaeffer to Chuck Colson, all argued against reducing faith to mere cerebral formulas. So perhaps we should just call it biblical wisdom and get on with it. This quest to incarnate Christ's claim on all of reality, as articulated by the theologian Abraham Kuyper when he said, quote, "There's not a single square inch in the whole domain of human existence over which Christ, who is sovereign over all, does not cry out, mine." And our job, as Chuck Colson often said, is to go anywhere and everywhere that God leads us, always crying out his. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet with Breakpoint.
Thank you, John. Outside next, weatherman Kevin Williams.
Here is your family life forecast for this afternoon, where skies have not yet cleared. They will. It'll turn out mainly sunny but chilly, chillier than it's been. High temperatures, mostly 40s, dropping into the 20s tonight. Clouds thicken tomorrow with some late day nighttime rain. Milder tomorrow. High temps 50s. And warmer on Thursday. Cloudy though, breezy occasional rain. High temperatures Thursday in the 60s and lower 70s.
Hi, Kevin. This is the Noon Report on Family Life. I'm your host, Bob Price. Here's what's happening Tuesday, the first day of April. The most expensive judicial race in U.S. history is unfolding today in Wisconsin. Voters there headed to the polls to decide the balance of the state Supreme Court. Today's result will tilt the ideological makeup of the court. Correspondent Ed O'Keefe.
The race for a seat on the Wisconsin Supreme Court between Democratic-backed Susan Crawford and GOP-endorsed Brad Schimmel has raked in big money, a record $80+ million.
Also today in Florida, there are two special elections happening to fill open seats in Congress. Both of those districts are heavily Republican. The GOP holds just a 3-seat advantage right now in the House. President Trump's tough new tariffs on U.S. imports kick in tomorrow. He's planning a Rose Garden ceremony to celebrate what the administration calls Liberation Day.
I call it a lot of different names, but it's really, in a sense, it's a rebirth of a country, because how we could have afforded to do what we did. We help everybody, and they don't help us. The term I like best probably is the liberation of America. It's the liberation of this country.
What's not known is how many countries are impacted by the tariffs or what the net effect will be on you, the consumer.
We're jumping off the cliff right now.
And you can't see the bottom.
No.
That's Jim Seavid. He owns an auto dealership in Detroit. Most experts predict the cost of a new foreign-made automobile will increase by anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 as a direct result of these tariffs. Gasoline prices are about 40 cents lower than they were this time last year. Typically, this is the time of year when motorists notice a spike in pump prices, but not this year. According to AAA, the average price for regular unleaded in New York is $3.11 a gallon. In Pennsylvania, it's selling for about $3.26 a gallon right now. House Republicans held a hearing this morning on the activist judges who may be undermining the Trump agenda. Massachusetts Democrat Jim McGovern calls these hearings nothing more than intimidation tactics.
If a judge doesn't bow down to Trump or Republicans' extremist agenda, Republicans want to strip that judge's authority.
But California Representative Darrell Issa says there's a real problem in this country with judges behaving badly.
This administration has seen 67% of all the national injunctions ever granted against them.
Issa is sponsoring legislation in Congress that would rein in the reach of activist judges. That measure, however, expected to go nowhere in the U.S. Senate. Scientists in California have developed a device that translates thoughts about speech into spoken words in real time. How about that? They hope the brain-computer interface may someday be able to give voice to the voiceless. Researchers tested this technology on a 47-year-old woman who was unable to speak for 18 years after suffering a stroke. NASA astronaut Butch Wilmore is once again talking publicly about his Christian faith.
The Word of God continually infilling me, I need it, and to tie in and to worship with my church family was vital. I mean, it's part of what makes me go.
He and Sonny Williams, fresh back from their 9-month stint in orbit, gave their first news conference yesterday since landing back on planet Earth. Wilmore says he watched multiple church services every week from the International Space Station just to stay connected.
It was invigorating. It was part of what I need as a believer in Jesus Christ to continue that focus day in and day out, because I need that fellowship, even though it's fellowship from afar.
About 250 miles above our heads. Afar. Butch Wilmore sharing his faith at a press conference yesterday. You're listening to the Noon Report for a Tuesday on Family Life.
Welcome back to another edition of Hometown Heroes on Family Life. I'm Mark Webster, and this week's guest is Lisa Lyon, Executive Director of The Relief Zone, a faith-based, multifaceted child care program in the Chautauqua County community of Frewsburg, known locally as TRZ. It's been going strong now for over 20 years.
In 2000, a church had merged with another church and left the building empty here, and some parents in the community got together and asked the church that still owned owned it if we could utilize the facility to run a youth outreach program. A bunch of parents got together, we got a bunch of volunteers, and started a youth outreach program for youth in grades 7 through 12. We had a bunch of donated equipment, foosball, pool tables to engage the kids, and we kind of went from there. It was majority of the time a faith-based program, but not always. We had different organizations and people that would come in and speak to the kids about different things that would engage them.
And now it's 20 years later, and it's really turned into something a little bit bigger.
In 2005, we received a grant from the federal government to get the organization itself set up. We hired staff. I was hired at that point, and we started getting things set up. And in 2006, we started our first before-school program for the elementary school right here in Frewsburg. There was a huge need for that, and so we were able to partner with the Frewsburg Central School District. In 2011, we started with our after-school program, and in the midst of that, we also started a half-day program, full-day program, and includes our summer programming, so when school's not in session, just to kind of meet that wraparound need that parents have. Now, childcare is one of the biggest needs within our country, I would say.
Sure, yeah.
I know in New York State, it's considered a childcare desert, so we're in the process of trying to help families within our community be able to afford childcare and have quality, affordable childcare within their communities. We were able to license our childcare programming. We had the state come in 2015 and tell us that because of the number of programs we were running and the number of kids that were involved, that we had to license our program. So we did have to move our programs from our facility to the elementary school. We were able to license the school a lot quicker than we could license our facility here because it is a 200-year-old church building. It was like an $80,000 project to get our facility licensed, and in the process, we had our programs meet over at the elementary school. And then we were able to get this building licensed also in 2018. So a lot has happened in the past 25 years since we started here.
Absolutely. And as a ministry, how are you able to weave in meeting some spiritual needs at the same time?
A lot of that is a lot of character development activities and traits and things that we're doing. One of our staff members actually grew up with our kids program here, attended our youth program, and she has her master's in social work and is working as a counselor at a school. So she does some programming for us in the summer that addresses some of those needs. And then also she incorporated like the fruits of the spirit within that. So to get that in there too. And then also in Frewsburg with the school district, we partnered with them again, the Impact Club. Primarily it used to be just in the high schools, but now they have what they call Impact Kids Club that meets in the elementary schools. So we worked with the school district making that happen in Frewsburg, and we actually meet here at TRZ on Wednesdays for 2nd through 6th graders following the school calendar. We have a teacher, a parent, one of our board members, and a couple students that actually volunteer to run that program. And then our kids that are participating in our after-school program can do that, but then we also have kids from the school that can attend that, and that is a completely faith-based program. So we're really excited to be able to pull that back in and to be able to work with the school district and with Impact to be able to do that. That's a big part of it. And just really as we're looking at our programming and what we're doing, we're thinking about the child as a whole, not just meeting physical needs or educational needs, but just everything, emotional needs and so forth. Kids go through a lot nowadays, you know, and so trying to help them understand it's okay to feel emotions, it's okay to feel things, but we need to learn how to reset ourselves, self-regulate so that we don't let one thing that happens during the day wreck our whole day. You know, it's like, okay, that happened, feel it, let's get over it, let's move on and try to make the rest of the day better.
You've seen this grow over 20 years now. What's the impact you've seen in the big picture in the Frewsburg community?
Just the connection, knowing that there's a place. We've just seen, as a community, come together. We have a staff member that works with us right now. He was one of our very first kids in 2006. He has been working for us here for several years. To see that kind of come full circle, he sees the value in it and what it meant to him as a kid growing up. I know our mission is that, you know, the Christian values will be so integrated into the fabric of our community that it touches children's entire lives. Seeing that happen and come to fruition, a lot of the businesses, individuals, churches help to support us. And then it's prayer, too. I mean, a lot of the churches will be praying for us, a lot of individuals praying for the organization. It's just phenomenal to see a small town come together. And I grew up here, too, so it is really nice to see that.
That's Lisa Lyon, Executive Director of TRZ, The Relief Zone, a faith-based child care program in Frewsburg, New York. Please join us again next time as we search for your home, your town, your hero. It's Hometown Heroes on Family Life.
Thank you very much, Mark Webster. Hometown Heroes comes your way Tuesdays during the Noon Report. You can subscribe, listen to, and share this feature along with all our original podcasts at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or FamilyLife.org.
Good afternoon. Here is your Family Life regional weather forecast as high pressure from central Canada builds toward us. Skies have been clearing. We expect a chill but dry and somewhat sunny afternoon ultimately, where clouds still linger. Skies tonight will feature some starlight. Tomorrow, it'll be a milder day, but an approaching disturbance will generate later day rain, and that system will pull warmer air into the region with some additional rain on Thursday. Our forecast for this afternoon, where skies have not yet cleared, they will. It'll turn out mainly sunny but chillier than it's been. High temperatures, mostly 40s, dropping into the 20s tonight. Clouds thickening tomorrow with some late day nighttime rain. Milder tomorrow, high temps 50s. And warmer on Thursday, cloudy though, breezy occasional rain. High temperatures Thursday in the 60s and lower 70s.
All right, Kevin, thank you. Finally at noon, be careful what you fall for today. It is, after all, April Fool's Day. But where'd it come from anyway? Correspondent Mark Mayfield.
Well, there may be no clear official origin. References to the first day of April as a day of trickery date all the way back to the 14th century. The first recorded April Fool's Day was in France in 1582. It's believed that April 1st was celebrated as New Year's Day before the Gregorian calendar changed it to January the 1st. Those who didn't get the word about the change were called fools, and people played tricks on them.
And that's where it came from. Our coverage continues with correspondent Michael Kastner.
Social media sites are swarming with bogus goods and services like Flat Earth travel insurance, a cat poo scented candle which actually smells like roses, and a Razer Skibbity headset. To verify if the product is actually real, make sure to verify the source, check URLs for misspellings, and don't believe everything your friends say. I'm Michael Kastner.
Yeah, some good advice there. A lot of tomfoolery happening today, April Fool's Day. And that's our world, the world we live in. Tuesday, the first day of April. I'm Bob Price, Family Life News.
You've been listening to the Noon Report, heard weekdays on Family Life. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.